There we go. Okay. So welcome everybody to our Unbridled Adventure Debriefing. And if you've attended one of these before, if you've watched one of them before, you know that what we tend to do is have the winners of the event sort of as our main speakers to kind of share their secret to success. But then we're certainly welcome to have other people chip in at different times about their experience. Feel free to jump in and ask questions at any point. Probably the best thing if you want to just use the little raise your hand function, which if you click on the reactions button at the bottom of your screen there, if you click on reactions, you'll see that one of the things you can do is raise your hand like that. That's what'll come up if you have raised your hand successfully. And I'll get to you and we'll try to get everybody's questions answered. So with that little intro out of the way, so the first thing I'm going to do is introduce our winning team, Tribe 325. And that was the duo of Karen Knoll and Rachel Fernung. And so why don't you all start out by telling us sort of how you know each other, how long you've been in adventure racing, what your roles are on the team. Give us some insight into you.
So Rachel and I actually went to high school together. We've known each other since we were wee little beings. And probably lost a little bit of touch throughout the years when we went to like college and things like that. But then my twin sister, who was a lead navigator for us in other races. And Rachel did some adventure racing and conned me into joining them many years ago, several years ago. And yeah, so I've joined them and we've been doing it for several years now.
Yeah, and you all have raced nationals together, I know, and I've seen you at lots of my races before. So how long have you all been racing together?
I think six or 7 years.
I would say you and Kathy had been doing it for maybe 8, and I joined maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah.
5 or 6 years ago.
So
when we took a little hiatus last year, we didn't race at all. Everybody was missing it.
And for 1 or 2 years, we haven't raced. So we really wanted to do this race. We know that Steph, you put on amazing races. So thought it would be a good one to get back into.
Thanks. So when you raced just the two of you, how did you all divide up the tasks? You suddenly have 2 people doing the work of 3. So how did you all divide that up for this race?
Yeah, that's a good question. Karen is a beast physically, so we knew coming out of the gates that she was going to be stronger than I was. So we'd kind of communicated about that ahead of time, and she's definitely a strong navigator. And of course, it helped tremendously each of us having a map to be able to contribute. So.
And did it play out that way during the race? Did you both kind of contribute to the navigation, or how did that play out?
Absolutely. I mean, there were many places where I would have chosen something that was not very bright. And Rachel's like, well, what do you think about this? So I'm like, makes perfectly good sense. Why don't we do that? So it definitely, having multiple maps or map per participant is such a game changer and such a way to keep people involved. And it really helped us out a lot.
For sure.
Yeah, good deal. And now I know I was out there on the bridge when you all were running back after the paddle back to your bikes. And I know that Karen had Rachel on tow at that point. Did you all just tow on foot, or did you do any towing on bike as well?
We would have loved to tow on bike. But unfortunately, Karen's tow system wasn't with us on this race. So that was a bummer.
My bike was in the shop until Rachel picked it up and actually brought it down to the race. And the guy who fixed my bike did not have my tow system included with my bike. So we got down there and we're like, oh no, there's no tow system. But
yeah,
Rachel's a very strong biker, so it was fine. It was all good.
Yeah. This is a good race to tow on the bike, really, because of the, being so much on that paved bike trail. It's a pretty safe race to try to bike on, but there also weren't a whole lot of hills either. So, I mean, I'm sure that helped a lot. That's where I always need Sarah towing me, is on the uphills on the bike. So I can keep up with her a little better if we're on flats, but good deal. And so what were you all using for your tow on foot?
I think we used to have some, Rachel, did we have rubber cording at one point? But
We did. Mhm.
yeah, we did not have that this time. We had some, we weren't as prepared as we would have liked to have been, but we had some rope, some tiny rope that we,
Paracord. Yeah.
that we typically would use maybe to tie up a canoe if we had to, or something like that. So it was in my pack, and we just tied that to my pack, and then to Rachel's. Did you tie it to your belt at one point, or just
I
your?
think, yeah, I had it on my hand, had it on my belt, had it, yeah, around my waist, tried several different things. But I mean, sometimes it was just a matter of me holding on to the side of her pack just to, try to keep up, because it's so easy to fall behind. If your other person is, super strong. So
Yeah. Okay. So I want to move on and talk about the race, but I always think it's so important to point out that winning teams tow.
for sure. Yeah, for sure. There's no shame in it.
No,
No
that's
shame.
absolutely right. Okay. So let's talk about the flow of the race, and I'll kind of give people a big picture. I know the people who are sitting in on this were all there, so they kind of have an idea of it. But for somebody who might watch this who didn't participate this year, who's maybe thinking about whether it's a race they would want to do next year, or they just want to get some insight from you all about it. So in terms of big picture, this was a 6-hour race, and the teams started with a compass challenge that was basically they got bearings they got 4 different bearings and had to run to that bearing and get a letter off of a cone and then come back. There were 4 of those, and it was all big wide open. We were basically in a big wide open field, so you could see all of the cones around the perimeter, and you had to take a bearing to the correct cone and then come back. And once you did all that, you got your sport ident stick, and that's kind of when your race really started. And you biked to the first transition area, you dropped your bikes, you went out and did a short little section on foot to pick up 3 trekking points. You came back, you got in your boat, and you paddled downstream about 2 miles, picked up a checkpoint along the way there. You took out, and then you were on foot to get back up to where your bikes were. And so you were on some trails and picked up a couple more points on your way back to your bike. And then from that point, so up to that point, what I've described were all mandatory points. So that's your first, hour and a half to 2 hours of the race, depending on your speed. Those were all mandatory points. And then at that point, when you picked your bikes back up, that's when you got to start making some decisions about points that you could drop. So from there on, everything was optional. And so your optional points included a couple of bike points that were on some single track trail as you made your way down to your next transition area, where you dropped your bikes again. You went out on an orienteering course, and we had orienteering maps from Orienteering Louisville. In the middle of that orienteering course was an orienteering maze relay. And there's a video on our Facebook page if you wonder what a maze relay is. And so both teammates did the maze relay style, and that had a bonus point. So I really kind of encourage people to do that one and not drop it by making it worth 2 points, and all of the other checkpoints were worth 1. And then after that orienteering leg, there were 3 optional points on the bike that were sort of further away from the finish, or you could beeline back to the finish, and so you finished the race on your bike. And you had 6 hours to do all that. So that's kind of the big overview. My first question is, when you all sort of looked at all of the course instructions and looked at the maps and everything you had at the start of the race, did you think you would be able to clear it?
We were hopeful. We thought we could. We didn't, like, sometimes on bigger races we will know that we can't clear it and we'll X out some points identify those and say, we're not going to go get that. But we did not do that in this race. We had high hopes that we would be able to clear it.
Okay, good deal. And I'll not keep people who weren't there in suspense. You did clear it with literally a couple of minutes to spare, right? Like
I
3
think it was seconds.
seconds. Okay, seconds to spare. So yeah, which tells me that at some point you had to have made some hard decisions on whether you could continue going after those points to the south or not. So did you all plan that from the get-go? Did you look at any points and say, okay, here's where we need to check our time and sort of make sure we're staying on track? Or how did you have a plan from the start for what you might drop later?
Yeah, I think right before we started, we said, all right, this is a good possibility for us to be able to clear this. We're going to have to watch our time, but we're going to have to race quickly. But we are going to have to race smartly so that we don't make mistakes. And we laughed about that on the way home. I think we probably made a mistake on every single leg, including the the prologue. So we had
made
lots
two
of
on the
catching up to do.
prologue.
Yeah, yeah. So we just had to continuously keep pushing ourselves throughout the race and checking our time. And of course, the decision at the very end to head south and get those last 3 points, we knew it was going to be close.
Okay. So let me pop the maps up here so that we can start going through some of the course. Okay, so while I do this, tell me so your mistakes on the prologue, the orienteering course, just taking a wrong bearing, or what was the source of that, do you think?
I think we got excited and tried to go too fast.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess we took the wrong bearing. Or maybe we didn't even pay attention to our bearing. We just maybe thought this is that direction. Like we thought we had it already tuned in and didn't take the bearing. So we missed a couple there and had to go back out for them.
Okay. All right. So these are the materials that everybody got. So what you had were 2 pages of course instructions. You had this big overview map of the Parklands area. So this is just the entire Parklands. We were staged out of here by the egg lawn, and that's where that prologue was there on the egg lawn. And then you had your topo map. So there were 2 of these. Here was sort of the north map. Here was the south map. And then you had your orienteering map for that leg that had the maze in it. And then you did not get your maze maps until you got to the maze, but that's what those looked like, one for each teammate. So they had everything up through this map from the start of the race. So talk us through, what's the first thing you do when you get all of your materials for the race, the course instructions and all your maps? How do you process that stuff?
Go ahead, Rach.
She's muted, so you're gonna have to take it. Karen.
Okay. Unmute yourself, Rachel. So typically we would, it seemed like we're rusty. We hadn't done it for a while. And she and I haven't raced together just by ourselves before. So it took us a little bit longer, but we were trying to go over the main map that you gave, the 2-sided map. We thought we'd roll distances, but we didn't need to because we saw that they had been marked on the map for us. I think that we did not look at the park map, which in retrospect was a mistake because we could have found some useful information like road names and things like that on the park map. But we typically would roll our maps, try to get distances between checkpoints or between key points, and try to figure out if we needed X out a point, if we think we can't get it, what's that going to be? So we typically do that and figure out our route as far as we can. As much time as we have, we'll try to figure out the route we plan to take on each leg.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, And so when you all go through the course instructions, do you read the entire course instructions first and then go back and start marking maps, or are you marking maps as you go?
Well, I was in charge of reading the instructions, and apparently we skipped very quickly on down past some really relevant information at the top that we looked back on that was in bold and underlined. But yeah, we just got excited to get to the points and start picking our routes and how we were going to approach different checkpoints. And of course, this particular map, there were a lot of options to take trails to get to points. So we were looking at different ways that maybe we could bushwhack through to save some time versus taking a longer distance and following the trails. So yeah, it was kind of a team effort, I suppose.
Okay, so talk to us about some of the things that went right for you and that went wrong for you. You said you feel like you made a mistake on practically every leg. So talk us through what some of those things were that you feel like, have some lessons that other people can take from it, right? We're not here to just like laugh at every mistake you made. We want to learn from them. So walk us through some of the things that you look back and go, oh, here's how we could have avoided that.
I think it's important to remember, and the sport's so humbling. It's important to remember that no matter how good you think you're going to go out and be, you're always going to have mistakes, period. And it's how you recover from those mistakes that, makes you a strong team. But just for example, we had picked our route from CP1 up to CP2, and we had that highlighted on our map. And at the last minute, I said, we should take this different route. Let's take this trail instead. So we made a last minute decision, again, because we were excited and trying to push and go quickly. And it ended up being a poor choice, and we had to backtrack and go back to our original route.
Okay. How about, so I'm curious if anyone, I'm confident that no one did portage. I'm curious if anyone even considered portaging right here. So they were putting it right here at this TA and paddling down around this big horseshoe bend. And my husband and I, when we were scouting, he gave a hard look at this, and I was like, no, nobody's going to want to do that. These boats are way too heavy. You don't want to pull it up that. It was doable. It would have been heinous. I'm just curious if anybody thought about it.
We definitely didn't.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately not being able to see that part of the screen, but
yeah, Stephanie, I was going to say I can't see. All I see is your desktop.
Huh. Well, I wonder why that is.
I don't know.
Oh, I know why. Because I've got the thing on the wrong side. Can you see it now?
I see you.
See
What?
you.
Yeah.
You've stopped sharing your screen.
It says I'm screen sharing.
Well, we see your lovely face.
It is lovely.
Let me move this over here. I don't know why. That's weird. I've got to stop share. Now, if I go back to share, it'll work this time. Right?
There we
go.
There it is. Yay.
Phew. Oh man, technology is so hard. So much harder than adventure racing. So yeah, right here. I was curious if so you all are saying you all hadn't looked at. Yeah, it would have been bad because like when we first scouted it, getting it up out of here, other than the fact that the boats weigh, 1,100,000 pounds each. So the thought of like having to get it up that was actually pretty clear, nice little trail. But trying to put back in over here, it was like going through a jungle.
That would have been under that bridge where the checkpoint was. Yeah, that would have been tough.
Yeah, it was a jungle from the road to that bridge. And it was a jungle with a little footpath that goes down to it, but trying to get those big yellow banana boats down there.
And that paddle wasn't too long. It wasn't too long around that loop.
Yeah. I was just curious if anybody thought about it.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Because I didn't even know that would be a legal thing to do, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that in an adventure race, even though you're in a canoe, if you chose to just pull it across like that, it's allowed.
Yeah, with something like that, for sure, like to me, that's an obvious enough possibility to portage that if I, as the race director, didn't want you to do that, I would have told you no portaging. So, you know, generally, there are sort of two things that we think about. Well, there are a few things that we think about as possibilities for you to do to be creative like that. One is portaging your boat. The other one is bike whacking. So that means taking your bike off trail. And the other would be dropping your bike and running, or like leaving your boat if there were, if there were like checkpoints off the paddle. Of course, you know, if they're not on the water. You know, you've got to go by the mode of transportation that's specified, but as a general rule, if the race director doesn't tell you that you cannot portage, then you can. And if the race director does not tell you you cannot bike whack, then you can. And typically, if the race director does not tell you that you have to stay with your bike, it's generally considered okay to like drop your bike and go on foot, which is why I told you in these directions, in your instructions and rules, that you had to stay with your bikes. Because otherwise, what you would have done is, what I would have done anyway, is drop my bike right here and tried to hike in and pick up CP7 and hike back out instead of riding this loop. And the whole point of that checkpoint was, if you wanted to get it, you were going to have to ride this single trail. Of course, you could go in and back out if you wanted to, but I wanted you, the whole point of that point was that you had to ride that single track trail. So if I had not told you, you must stay with your bikes on the bike leg, it's generally considered okay to drop your bike and run after a point, mainly because we think of being on foot as sort of a lesser means of travel, right? A slower means of travel. And so most race directors are okay. It's sort of the etiquette or whatever understood that it's okay to go on foot on a bike leg, unless the race director has told you really specifically, you know, only use the means of travel, then that sort of thing. So yeah, there's definitely some, it's one of those that we generally say, unless the race director told you you couldn't, you could.
All right, I had no idea about that. So I've learned something valuable
Yeah,
tonight.
good, awesome. You know, you had to take your boat with you.
Right,
Of course,
but I
you
mean,
would in that situation anyway.
yeah, I had not realized that that was even a possibility. So,
Yeah, it was intended to be an option for you. And actually, when we set the point there initially, it was not so overgrown between the road and the point where you would put back in that it would have been a really heinous option. And so here's the other thing. The other reason why I considered that sort of an okay option to give you, what I would not have wanted to do was to make that look like a really attractive, viable option, knowing that it was a heinous bushwhack down there if you didn't have a way to figure that out. In this case, what you could have done, you were biking right past there on your way up to the put-in, right? So
right.
if you had wanted to scout that to see what that portage would look like, you had an opportunity to do that. You could have stopped on your bike on your way up and gone down and looked at what that put-in would be like and what the takeout would be like over there. So you had an opportunity to scout that on your bike on your way north, which is why it didn't bother me that this was like this heinous, overgrown, thick stuff, because you can't see that on the map, right? So I wouldn't want that to sort of lure you into this decision that you would make without good information. But because I gave you the opportunity to figure that out on your way up, if you were looking at that as a route choice, I considered that fair. Okay.
And
Moving,
not all race directors are that kind.
well, you know, and I won't say that like I do things perfectly. I don't every time, but I've been on the other side of it enough times that I try to think about things like that. So I definitely try.
So can I ask another question?
Sure.
Because when we first started talking about this, I wasn't seeing the map. And so I'm going to go back to make sure I understand. So, Karen, did you portage across there, or did you go through the water the whole way?
We paddled the whole way. We didn't, honestly, we didn't even look at that. We didn't see that. It might have teased us, or we might have thought, oh, let's portage that, which probably, in my opinion, would have been a mistake. Looks like there's a bit of a hill there and there's a lot of brush. So as you said, Stephanie, so we didn't even see it, but we did not portage it.
Okay, that's why I just
Those are good
didn't.
things to
that,
see. Definitely
'cause
good things to see, because sometimes you'll
Yeah.
save a lot of time doing that.
Yeah, because I just had a different concept of what portage even meant. So it's just like, oh, you've just opened up a whole new dimension for me.
Good.
Conversation.
Great. Yeah, I mean, sometimes a portage in a race can really pay off. In this instance, I think it would not have, and it's not because of, I know it looks really steep right there where you would have taken out. That actually wasn't so horrible. In fact, there was kind of like a drainage ditch that went down to the water from an overlook, like there's an overlook right up there. So that was really clear and not as steep as it looks. It wouldn't have been heinous, except that the boats weighed so much, right? You didn't want to carry those boats 2 feet. But what was really bad was that how thick it was down here to try to get back in. So nobody portaged, and it's, yeah, it would have been a slower option in this case. Yeah. Okay, so what else? Any mistakes on the paddle? You all didn't go in the water or anything like that, did you?
We didn't capsize. But this is something actually that we've been bad at, but we're better at in this race, is that, I don't know why, but sometimes we just don't want to get wet initially. But we just, like, if you just don't want to get your legs wet, you don't want to get wet. But we jumped in right away. Anytime we touched bottom or thought we would, one of us or both of us jumped out and pushed or pulled. I think we made our best time and made up the most time on the paddle, just because of that. Like we're like, okay, we're going slow, jump out, go, push. So that was something different than we've done typically.
It helped that it was such a warm day. It felt nice to be in the water, right?
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. Unless it's a super cold day so that it actually is like a safety issue to be wet in the water, I say get in the water as soon as you get to the paddle. Like, because yeah, this whole going, and the same thing with like trekking and stuff, you know, like we spend so much time trying to avoid getting wet just because it's a comfort thing, you know. And now if you're going to be in a big, huge, long race and, you know, it's potentially hours and hours, so that it's actually like chafing and blistering type problem. But for a 6-hour race in the summer, just get wet as soon as you can. And you're going to go so much faster, not trying to stay dry. Yeah. All right. So then you trekked back up to the T8. So now, did you all look at the wrong checkpoint on your way back? Or was that a different team who was telling me they were looking at CP7 instead of 6 on the trek on the way back?
I don't think
I
that
don't think that was us.
Okay.
I think we're pretty good on finding all of our points.
Yeah. Okay. Good deal. And then you got on your bike. And so we know you went to 7. Did you all ride that trail all the way through, or did you double back? How did you do that?
We rode it through. We actually, so we made a mistake. We started to go down by that lake initially and noticed that pretty quickly. That was another mistake. and realized we were in the wrong spot and went back and got it, and we rode it all the way around.
And then you went past this big, beautiful sycamore on the Valley of the Giants Trail. Okay, well, and so here is the area where we had, you mentioned not reading the course instructions very well, or the issue too was just not being familiar with some of the trail names and road names. So the course instructions told people don't get on Beckley Creek Parkway. And it also referenced the Louisville Loop. And now one issue that I'll take responsibility for is that on this map that you all had, it didn't have a legend. And so you wouldn't know necessarily that this purple trail through this is the Louisville Loop. Like, I think it has it down here somewhere. Yeah, down here, this purple is identified as the Louisville Loop. But that's the only place on this map that it's the Louisville Loop. And this map doesn't, I think it doesn't refer to Beckley Creek Parkway anywhere. So you really needed to look at this park map to know what those were. And so that's a really good learning point. For people to take away. Number one, if you read a travel restriction that says don't get on Beckley Creek Parkway, and then you look at your maps and you don't see Beckley Creek Parkway anywhere, ask the race director, right? If there's a travel restriction in your instructions, make sure you know exactly what it means, where that is on your map, and make sure before you take off and before you plan your route that you know exactly where you can and can't go. At Nationals last year, we had this issue come up, and it's heartbreaking having to penalize teams for travel restrictions that you know were unintentional, right? I mean, I know yours was unintentional. I know that at Nationals last year, there were several teams who violated a travel restriction, and it was completely unintentional, and it's because they just weren't reading the map right. And so, yeah, just, I can't emphasize that enough because it happens with surprising frequency, and, you know, try as we might to make sure that directions are clear. It just happens. And so the only way I know to prevent it is just make sure that you read every word of the course instructions. And, you know, keep an eye out, especially, so this is where it was telling them not to travel on Beckley Creek Parkway. You know, keep an eye out for travel restrictions. It's actually more common than not that there will be some kind of travel restriction in your course instructions telling you you can't go on a certain highway or whatever. So if you don't see travel restrictions anywhere in your instructions, it's worth just asking, is there anything on this map that's off limits, right? Because sometimes, ideally, what we would do would be mark your map with the off limits areas. Right? That's what we would like to do. That's what I would like to do. The problem with trying to do that in this case is the Louisville Loop runs right alongside Beckley Creek Parkway in a lot of places. So if I tried to mark out Beckley Creek Parkway as something you couldn't be on, it would be really difficult to distinguish that from the Louisville Loop because they're side by side in so many places. So what happened in this case is, when they went to, they were on the Louisville Loop. When you get to this spot right here, as you go to get on the Louisville Loop, there's this big sign that says Louisville Loop closed ahead. And what it's talking about is like several miles away. And so it's kind of weird that there's a sign up here because there are multiple more access points to the Louisville Loop. And so you read that and you think it's this section of the Louisville Loop that's closed. And so what they did was they stayed on Beckley Creek Parkway right here because they thought that this part of the Louisville Loop was closed. And so you can see, you know, they did that instead of that, which, you know, probably saved them 2 minutes or something. And so that's why, you know, we did impose a time penalty and a 1-point penalty. There were 2 teams that did that. So that's what that's about. And that's a, you know, a painful but good learning lesson for people to take away on that.
Stephanie, if you were racing or the navigator, would you have marked out on your map after reading the race instructions?
I would not have marked out Beckley Creek Parkway. I would have just highlighted the Louisville Loop.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I would have been highlighting this section. And then, you know, I guess at that point, then when I got to that sign that you all saw, and I thought, well, wait a second, you know, that certainly would have given me pause. And then at that point, I may have, you know, gone back and looked back at the
Park map.
park map, yeah, to try to figure out what's going on here. Yeah, but you know, I totally get it in the heat of where you were.
So I think we had highlighted a majority of our course up until that point. And I don't think we got, like, typically we will highlight our routes, what we think we're going to do, but we did not get to, did we get to that, Rachel?
No.
Yeah, I don't think we had highlighted what our like bike route would be going down there. So we just got to that point and we're like, closed. Okay, let's go this way.
Yeah.
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 Again, back to being excited and going too fast instead of slowing down to
Process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so you got your bikes down to TA56. This is where you drop your bikes and you set off on foot into this orienteering section. So this is the separate orienteering map. Right here is where they dropped their bikes. They're going to 10 through 15 over here. Number 12 is the maze. And you could do these in any order. So, and there was a window of time that the maze would be open. I'm assuming that window, it was like 12:30 to 3. I don't think anyone would have gotten, well, I know no one got there even close to 12:30, and no one should have been there after 3. So did that though play into your all's planning in terms of how you would tackle this O course, or was it a wide enough window that you didn't have to think about it?
I think we had plenty of cush time with that.
Yeah, I think we knew we'd be there in time. I think we monitored our time on the O course, but yeah, we weren't worried about making it to the Mazo.
Okay. And so what order did you all do these in?
We went counterclockwise. So a few years ago, we had no clue what the start finish icons even meant. We didn't even know orienteering, the triangle, the circles. We knew nothing. Actually, in nationals a few years ago, Stephanie, we probably lost like 3 hours and I don't know, 10 points because we had no clue anything about orienteering.
No.
So we did review that the night before. We're like, what do these symbols mean? Because we're not orienteers. We can read topo maps, but so we did review that. But we went counterclockwise around it. We went 10, 15, 14, then 12, back out to 13 and 11.
Okay. Good. Very good. Any issues with any of those? 14 was obviously the toughest point on the O course. Did you all have any issues with that, or you nailed it pretty well?
That was probably the toughest control on the course, I think, for us, but Karen got us right up there to it, found it fairly quickly, so.
Good deal. Did you all follow this nose up there, or did you take the creek?
We took the creek.
Yeah.
But the reentrant, like we came down the creek bed and then came up that reentrant just from the north up to it.
Oh, right here.
Yes, and then we came right back down to the creek, cut over to the next reentrant north, I think, and came up and took that up to 12.
Yeah, good deal.
Or a little, it's not really a
It was
reentrant.
beautiful, wasn't it? Wasn't that a nice creek walk?
Yes.
Beautiful. I fell in that creek. I got excited and ran a little bit and on a rock, sprained my toe. But it was beautiful. A lot of cool fossils. It was a very, very beautiful creek.
Yeah, there were some cool fossils in that creek. Yeah, good deal. Okay. All right, and so then the maze, any issues on the maze? There were a lot of teams who mispunched on the maze and had to redo a leg. Did you all have any mispunches?
We did not.
No,
It was-
we didn't.
It was energizing. It was fun. It was something to break up the race. The orienteering Louisville people were amazing. So
They
kind-
were, they were awesome. They were ensuring that we were staying cool and giving us ice in our buffs to put on our neck. It was, yeah, it was a fantastic little segment.
Yeah, good deal. Okay. So then you're back on your bikes, and then, so at that point, timing wise, what are you thinking?
that was we were questioning whether or not we'd be able to make it all the way back down to get all those points or not. We knew we'd try. We set a timer at that point. We're like, let's see how long it's going to take us to get down, to try to give us an idea of how long it's going to take us to get back. Karen Clark was there and she's like, you guys can do it. And we're like, okay, yeah, we can do it. So, I mean, that was a nice little vote of confidence. So we're like, let's do it. Let's try it. Typically we're, I think, probably a little timid on what we think we can do, but we just kind of busted our butts and tried to get them all. And on the way back, it was pretty sketchy though.
Yeah, so leaving TA6, then they would have biked down, and these were the 3 points that they had the option of going to get 16, 17, and 18, basically as an out and back, each one getting you a little further away from the finish, which is way up north. So that's the southernmost point on the course. And then you had to hoof it all the way back up to get back to the finish here. Yeah, so tell us about that bike ride back to the finish.
Well, I think it CP 17.
Oh, you just got muted, Rachel.
Am I back?
You're back, and let me pull up CP 17. Yeah, right here, the middle bridge.
Yeah, so we had grabbed 18. We were headed back, busting butt. At CP 17 is when we came across Better Halves.
Mhm.
And those two gals really just pushed us to the finish. We've talked about it repeatedly that if they had not been there right with us, it would have been tough for us to have come in. So that was pretty awesome. Just goes to show the camaraderie and adventure racing is just unparalleled. It's so cool.
Yeah, that's Deb Flout and Ashley Hunter.
Yes.
Their
Yeah.
energy, we've never met them before, but their energy was like unmatched. And I think, I mean, I don't think we would have finished on time had we not run across them, but they were, we rode with them on and off that whole way back.
Mm-hmm.
And they were pushing us, we were pushing them. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Very cool. So what else do you feel like went really well for you this race?
I think we were really good at our TAs, our transitions.
Comparatively, yes.
Yeah, we have a tendency to dilly-dally and, oh, do we need dry socks? And maybe I should sit down and have a snack right now. And we
Sometimes Rachel likes to eat an apple really slowly.
yeah, so we really just pushed the whole time. So that was huge for us. And we worked really, really well together. I mean, there were a few times that we both got aggravated with each other, but we recovered quickly. And yeah, overall, I think we
You
were
were
pretty happy.
aggravated with me?
You were aggravated with me?
And honestly, Rachel's so good about, like, I think you get in the moment and you start working out and you're trying and you're pushing and you don't think you need water and you don't think you need food. But Rachel's always so good about hydrate, eat a snack, hydrate, here, take some of this, which makes a big difference. I mean, after you get some food, even if you don't think you need it, you have so much more energy afterwards and you're in a better mental state.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sarah puts food in my mouth in transition areas when I'm sitting there working on the map or I'm plotting, doing sort of navigation stuff to get ready for the next leg. Sarah is over here changing my shoes and socks for me, shoving food in my mouth, and trying to
Love it.
make that transition as quick as we can. Yeah, well, it comes from, having teammates that you run with for a long time, right? That develops over time too, right? Yeah, where you get comfortable taking off each other's socks.
Right.
Being in the river, it's not good. Yeah. Okay, so does anybody else on the call have any other questions or anything that you want to weigh in on about what happened with your race? Anybody? Vicki, I want to hear from you because I know that this was your first race and you were racing with Mimi Rui, who's a super experienced racer. And so I'm just kind of curious about what you feel like you learned and sort of what you wish you had known before the race.
Well, I know that I won't wear readers on a on a little strap. No, but no, really. So since I didn't really know anything, going in, Mimi was really good at. She was forcing me to pick routes, and then if I wasn't sure, then she would just give me some guidance. But I signed up for 3 more after Unbridled, so
Woohoo!
I definitely got I mean, and it was like the camaraderie and the encouragement. I was kind of overcome. I'm like, this is wild. Because, I had volunteered at the mission race and people would come up to me that they recognized me or, they knew that I was trying to find a partner for Unbridled. So, it was a great experience. And Mimi and I are going to do a little paddle and navigation on Sunday. So she only lives a half an hour away from me. So I'm excited.
Yeah, terrific.
So, but it's the navigation is really, I'm trying to get out there and do the Q, is it Q cars? Is that how you call it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's what I need to feel confident.
Yeah.
But how do you like practice with the topo maps? I mean, it's a little different from the orienteering, right?
Yeah, it is different. The scale is a lot different. And with orienteering maps, you just have so much more detail because of that actually that's a really great way to progress because orienteering maps, because of all of the great detail and they're so accurate compared to a regular topo map, they're a really great map to try to learn navigation on because you have a lot of stuff to help you.
Yeah.
And so it's really a nice progression if you can learn on an orienteering map and sort of get comfortable with that. It will help you familiarize yourself with contour lines. And you'll progress through an orienteering map. The nice thing about orienteering maps or events is that there are different courses for every level. Wherever you are, there's a beginner course, an intermediate course, an advanced course. There are like 4 different levels of technical difficulty. And so if you progress through orienteering through those different courses, it's sort of stepwise teaching you more and more skills that you need to be able to navigate on a regular topo map. So you're going to start to learn how to use handrails and then how to read contour lines, and really knowing how to read contour lines is the secret to being successful on a 1 to 24,000 topo map.
So, yeah.
Lines.
So I'm doing one with my son. I roped him into doing this. So, he's 27 and very fit. And I've never heard of rope or towing. I'm like, maybe that would be a good idea.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And you have to plot your own coordinates on this one. It's like in North Carolina. I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I sign up for? So.
Oh, well, that sounds huge fun. So they're going to give you UTM coordinates and you'll have to plot those. Yeah. That'll be great fun. And plotting UTMs is fun too. If people can sort of let it be intimidating, it doesn't need to be intimidating. And I'll have a session with you if you want some other time. We can sit down and sort of talk about what plotting is, because
Okay.
if you understand what it is,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot less complicated than people make it. And I think once you sort of break it down and realize that it's not as complicated as people want it to be, it's less intimidating.
Okay, and I do have another question. So I was wondering, because I see people like you, they're usually like orienteering to the map or whatever north is. I mean, do people do pace counting and all that? Like the pair that won, did you do that? You know,
We've done it before. In this race, I think we did it, was in that creek bed, Rachel, when we were
Mhm, yes.
14, I believe it was. So we did start to pace count there, but on the landmarks look pretty obvious on the map. We're not very good at orienteering maps, so that's like we learned backwards, which I totally agree. It would be better to have learned orienteering, like smaller scale maps, and then go to bigger ones. But we started to do it on that, but then I think the landmarks just became pretty apparent to us that we stopped. But we definitely have done it in some of our bigger or longer races or bigger scale.
or so do you? What about if you go somewhere where there aren't a lot of land features? Or I was just listening to a podcast and I heard that Wisconsin doesn't have like the big land features that we have, you know, in the Midwest, maybe. Or have you gone to other states?
Yeah, we have, and we've done like, I mean, if you're on like a road and you need to cut in somewhere or something, I mean, we've done it before. We're not very good at it, to be honest.
Okay.
We're not very good. We're still learning that. We even
Okay.
on our drive down, because we live up in Indiana.
Okay.
On our drive down, we were actually discussing that and trying to remember what our paces are for, 100 meters or so we're and we still have a problem where we use miles and meters and we're kind of mixing them up. So we were trying to go over that and try to remember that, because it's just been a while for us and we don't use it that often, but I think it's extremely valuable. And I mean, Stephanie, I'm sure uses it all the time, maybe, but
I don't use it as often as I should. I try to use it more often. I'm kind of like you guys. I just try to do terrain association. But yeah, it's definitely, I've done orienteering meets and in Minnesota, especially, where pace counting was really critical because you just don't have those big obvious features. And like Karen said, even down here and where we are, where we've got this obvious reentrant and spur sort of system where the features are big and obvious, you can definitely have times that pace counting is going to be useful if you're wanting to cut in off a road at a particular time or leave the creek at a particular, distance or whatever. So pace counting is a really good tool to have in your belt. And the thing is, you've got to force yourself to practice it in order to be good at it and for it to be useful. And if you do that, then you start to use it all the time because you realize how useful it is. It's basically this other, navigation tool that you've now got, and it can be super useful. And I know that because as I've started to sort of make myself use it more, like the more you use it, the more you use it kind of thing. Like the more you use it, the more you want to. So yeah, I definitely encourage you to, learn how to pace count, figure out what your pace count is, because it's a great tool to have.
All right, thank you.
Diane?
Thank you for sharing all your knowledge, all of you. It's been very helpful.
You got the bug now.
I know.
oh,
I'm so happy.
Rachel and I have the itch again too. We hadn't raced for a while and we're looking for new races now. So
And I really thought I was too old to start because, I'm 54, but I thought, well, let me just give it a try.
Yeah,
And
never.
now there's longevity in this, I can tell. Yeah,
For sure. Yeah, we're both pushing 50, so.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
they call orienteering the sport of a lifetime. And yeah, when we go to the World Masters Orienteering Championships over in Europe, the oldest woman at World Masters last year. Her name was Sole. She's from Finland and she was 93 years old and she was using this magnifying glass like
Aw,
films.
That's precious.
I love it.
Yeah, I was like, I want to be Sole.
I
Yeah,
want to be
we
so late
heard-
too.
Yes. Woohoo.
Diane, your team had a pretty stellar result at Unbridled. Were there any takeaways that you had that you want to share?
Sure. So speaking as the senior member here in this group, since I'm older than all of you, a couple things. So it was our second time for Jeanette and I to race together. And we did the race last year. And last year we laughed at each other and at ourselves when we came in, because we came in 38 minutes early. And we were like, oh my gosh, we're both, and we talked about this before we ever started racing, that we're like so conscious of the time. So that was one of the things we said this year, we're going to push ourselves to the limit in terms of the time. And so I think we came in with about 5 minutes left. So for us, we felt really good about how we had pushed ourselves that way. And, the best thing so that was the best thing, is that we really pushed ourselves on the time, because we knew that was something in our nature, that we're so conscious about the time that we were too cautious. And the second thing, which is I really want to credit this to Jeanette, is that she is really good about the hydration and the nutrition. And so she was like clockwork, that was her thing, is that every 30 minutes she's telling us to drink. And she's, making me answer her about how I physically felt. And if she heard anything hesitant in my voice, she made us, she'd make me stop and say, okay, you eat this, you drink this. And I really felt like that was her superpower throughout the race, is that she kept us going, because it was a hot day, and it was really good that she was doing that. And then for me personally, I would say that what I need to work on is the transition areas. Like, we would come in and I would see us being there, one of the first teams to show up. And then we'd be one of the last teams coming out of the transition area. And I know that was about me, but part of it's about like the going into the orienteering phase. I was like, oh, I've got to put on my orienteering pants because I'm allergic to poison ivy and I don't want to get poison ivy. And then when we came out, I was like, oh, I've got to take off these orienteering pants because I don't, so that's something that I've got to work on, is practicing those transitions and getting better at, because that's where we would, that's my cat coming in, telling me I've been on here too long. But anyway, that's what I need to improve on. And then for both of us, we would say our takeaway in terms of what we were most intimidated about was mountain biking on a trail. So we eliminated 7 right away, because we were like, we're going to waste too much time because we're going to be too slow on that part. So we just eliminated that point and then moved on and just said, that's okay, because we'll be able to get the other points down south if we eliminate that one.
Yeah, that was a smart strategic move. I mean, if you weren't going to clear this course, number 7 was definitely the one to drop. Like, you were going to invest a lot more time in number 7 than in some of the other points that
Yeah.
you get. So it's really a math game. You've got to do the math. How long is it going to take me to go get that
Yeah.
versus another point?
Yeah. And we didn't make that decision until we picked up the bikes. And then she was like, already like, let's drop it. And I was like, no, give me 30 seconds to look at this, because I don't want to just automatically say no. Let's look and see what we can do here. And then I said, okay, we'll drop it and go on, because I didn't want to waste time debating about it.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that was a smart decision. So how many of the 3 Southern bike points did you get?
We did not get 18. We were pushing it, and honestly, we took more time than we went numerical through in order through the orienteering part, and we wasted time on 14. And so I was kind of kicking myself there for a little bit, like, oh, we wasted too much time there. But honestly, after the race was over, I think we would have come in late if we got to 18, because we had a cutoff time. We had said, okay, once we get down to where we only have about 35 minutes left, we've got to turn around and start heading back. And we got to 17 and we had 42 minutes. And then we stayed there for like a minute deciding, like, are we going to go for 18? And then we decided, no, we couldn't, we got to get back. And so it was a good call, because I think if we had actually got to 14 with the amount of time that I wanted to get to 14, then we would have gone for 18, and then we would have been late getting back. So ironically, I think we got back 5 minutes early, but I think we would have been back 5 minutes late
If you
if
had
we
an
had,
extra couple of minutes to sort of tempt you to keep going.
yes.
Yeah,
Because on the way back, that was one of the times before we got back to Pope Lick's parking lot. Like I told her, at Pope Lick's parking lot, I've got to stop and go to the water fountain and douse my head or something. And the way I said that to her, she said, no, we're stopping now. And she made me drink, and she gave me her water because I was out of water on my in my Camelback. And she made me drink water from her bike. And that made the difference there, because we weren't that far from it, but she heard it in my voice that she knew I needed to do something right then and not push it longer.
yeah. So 2 super important lessons there. Number 1, really being in tune to your teammate and making sure you make your teammate stop. Because as the teammate who's always sort of slower and weaker than my much stronger teammate, you know, it can be hard at times to like tell your teammate, I'm fading over here, you know, it's hard to be humble enough to share with your teammate how much you're hurting. And so having a teammate who can be in tune to that and who can reach out to you instead of waiting for you to reach out to them. So if you're the stronger teammate, you know, bear in mind that you're going to have to reach a hand back or down to
Yeah,
pull her up.
amen to that. And she's the stronger teammate. And in terms of that whole energy thing, I'm the stronger navigator, but in terms of her having the energy and the powerhouse and and understanding that, you can't just keep pushing yourself, even that 3-minute difference in what it would have taken us to get to where I was thinking the stopping point to douse myself,
Yeah.
making a difference.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it served you all well. You had a great result. And then the other big takeaway from what you've described is having that hard turnaround point and
Yeah.
like knowing, what your limits are and time management and making yourself turn around when you don't want to. Because it was about another 5-minute bike ride to 18 from 17 biking hard. And then you had to get back. So 10 minutes round trip. Basically, it would have added 10 minutes to your race to go get 18. And that's biking hard.
And that would have also drained our energy, because when I didn't realize it at the time until we got back to the finish that my Camelback was like totally empty. Like I had sucked it dry, but I didn't realize that. I mean, it just didn't register that, oh wow, I really was out of water.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that last adrenaline is what got you through that last couple of miles, I'm sure.
So So hydration is important. Nutrition is way more important than what we realize, especially on a hot day.
Yeah. All right, it's a little after 9, so I'm gonna wrap it up, I think. But thanks so much to everybody for coming, and to Karen and Rachel for sharing all their race experience and wisdom with us. And I'll post this on the Facebook page. So if you know of anybody who wasn't able to attend, you can tag them on that, and people will keep learning. Victoria will following your rising star.
It's really exciting. And I didn't know I was among Adventure Race royalty, because I was just happening to listen to the Dark Zone episode number 5. I'm like, oh my goodness. It was wonderful. Yeah. Thanks for doing this for women. This is great. The way that you
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
much. Thank you
and-
so much, Stephanie.
Yes.
Yeah. She's a
And this-
pioneer.
The
Yeah.
race
It takes a village, and we've got a great group, so I'm excited to be part of it. All right.